My father lifted his whiskey glass and said, "She's independent because she was never really part of this family." Then when my uncle asked what he meant, he looked straight at me and said it louder. "I'm done pretending, she's not my daughter." 31 people froze around the Thanksgiving table in my grandmother's house. My stepmother had already raised a tissue to her face, though her eyes were dry. A fork hit a plate. My 7-year-old cousin asked why Uncle Rowan was yelling. 2 aunts stood up and began clearing dishes because their hands needed somewhere to go. What nobody knew was that my grandmother had left an answer in a dusty blue shoebox in the hallway closet, 10 feet from my chair. "Don't go hunting for trouble," she told me. "But if trouble comes for you, that's where your answer will be." I kept that box closed for 19 years. I was 13 when we buried my mother. Ovarian cancer took her in 8 months. I stood beside her coffin in a black dress she had bought for my school dance. My father stood 3 feet away and never reached for my hand. My grandmother, Delia, held me and whispered, "Breathe, sweet girl, just breathe." 4 months later, my father brought home Candace and her little girl, Brielle. Within 6 weeks, Candace moved in. Within 8, my upstairs room became Brielle's. "She's younger," Candace said, smoothing pink bedding over my old mattress. "She needs the light." I moved to the basement and taped my honor roll certificate beside the fuse box. My father stopped looking at me like I belonged to him. I tried to earn my place anyway. Cooking, cleaning, perfect grades. Candace kept planting doubt with a smile. At church picnics, she would sigh over how hard Richard had it. My mother's name never touched her lips without sounding like dirt on glass. When I asked for help with college, he barely looked up from the paper. 1 week later, Brielle was enrolled in an expensive private school. I took loans, worked nights, and graduated nursing school with my father absent, and my grandmother clapping hardest in the 3rd row. Afterward, she gave me my mother's pendant. She died 2 years before Thanksgiving. When I reached her house, Candace was already sorting through her things. On the kitchen counter, I saw a law office envelope. When I asked about the will, Candace smiled and said, "There wasn't a formal reading. Your father handled it." 3 years earlier, Delia had called the family to a cardiac screening. 2 weeks later, she asked me to tea and told me the rumors Candace had been feeding my father about my mother. "It isn't true," she said, "and I can prove it." She had requested a paternity test from the screening samples. I said yes. The result came back 99.9%. Delia sealed it in the shoebox with a letter and a copy of her updated will. "If things get bad," she told me, "the box will tell the truth." So when Lauren texted me a week before Thanksgiving and said, "Dad wants everyone there," I knew trouble had finally arrived. I reached the closet during dessert and took the box before anyone could stop me. Back at the table, I opened it between the cranberry sauce and the candles. My grandmother's letter came first. My mother had been faithful, Candace had lied, and Delia had tried to stop it. Then came the lab report, then the will. My name was on the house. Candace stood up and started performing grief and outrage at the same time, telling everyone I was jealous, unstable, obsessed. My father, already pale, looked down at the paternity report in his hands and said, quietly, "You told me she wasn't mine." She had no answer for that. I read the last page aloud while the room held its breath. The house belonged to me. Delia had left it to me because she knew I had always been the one erased. Nobody moved. My father folded in on himself. Lauren left crying. Candace walked out with her purse clutched to her chest. The door shut behind her, and the house went quiet for the first time in years. I stayed that night in my grandmother's room. The next morning, the lawyer confirmed everything. The will was clean, witnessed, airtight. Candace had intercepted letters from the estate office, but the paperwork stood anyway. By winter, she was gone. My father tried to apologize in a coffee shop 3 weeks later. I told him I would not beg to be recognized again. He could learn to be my father or remain a stranger. Now I live in Delia's house. My mother's photo hangs over the fireplace. The closet is open, and the blue shoebox sits on my shelf, no longer a secret. Some nights, I touch the pendant at my throat and remember the woman who kept one space in the world ready for me. I wasn't his to erase, I was hers to protect. And now I am finally home.